way and no explanation for it. I've told you the story before. I probably don't need to tell you again, do I? But do you remember the story I told you about being in Memphis at a Billy Graham crusade? And all the pastors were gathered early. It was a big pastor's school, and we all came early to sit and hear some words from Billy Graham and his team, and then to have a prayer time. And they came on and asked us if we would pray because there was a huge storm, and we could see it. It was perfectly fine where we were, about 6 o'clock in the evening, but you could see this massive cloud coming our direction. And they said that it was going to shut down the whole crusade because it was violent weather. And it turned out to be a horrible storm that spawned tornadoes and hail and lightning and all that kind of thing. But what happened was, after we prayed, as that cloud approached, I'm just a kid. I've never seen anything, miracles much, or anything like that. And all of a sudden, this cloud comes and it just parts. It goes completely around this part of Memphis, Tennessee. Doesn't even affect this crusade, nor does it affect the people that are in that area coming into the crusade. And the only damage it did was out in the pastures. And it went right back together after it came by. I firmly believe if angels control the elements, and I believe they do, I think that angels were at work spreading that thing out, causing that miracle to take place so that crusade could happen. And many, many people discovered who Christ was that evening as a result of that. Okay, let me jump into what the angels do to Jesus, what they do for Jesus, for the Son. This is really a beautiful and meaningful study, and probably one that we should spend 2 or 3 weeks on. But the study of angels really opens up when you see them ministering in Jesus' life. Before he was on earth, the Bible teaches that they followed his orders. Since he's ascended to the heaven, they've been worshiping him as the precious Lamb of glory, slain from the foundation of the earth. But while he lived on the earth, they ministered to all of his needs. Think about at his birth. This is the first Sunday of Advent, the 4 weeks prior to Christmas. We're moving into that season, and where we celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. At his birth, angels predicted it, didn't they? In Luke chapter 1, verse 26, it says, in the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent this angel to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David. The virgin's name was Mary, and the angel went to her and said, "Greetings, you are highly favored, the Lord is with you." Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. But the angel said, "Don't be afraid, Mary, you have found favor with God." And here's the prediction: you will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus. And you remember Mary had never been with a man, and so this was a totally strange and foreign concept for her to grasp. So one of the things angels did for Jesus at his birth was they predicted it, and then they proclaimed it. Out in Luke chapter 2, verses 8 and 9, there were shepherds out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night, and an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were terrified. Now, an angel sighting is not your usual, conventional, familiar sight for an angel out in the field. And so the angels were terrified. And that's why the angel said to them, "Fear not, don't be afraid." Look at verse 10. But the angel said to them, "Don't be afraid, I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today in the town of David a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. And this will be a sign to you. You will find him wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger." Suddenly a great company of the heavenly host, that means tons of angels, appeared with this angel, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth peace to those on whom favor rests." Now, picture this entire horizon filled with these dazzling beings, these resplendent beings, and you've got all these dumbfounded shepherds with their mouths open, staring in amazement. Can you imagine what that must have been like? So angels were around at his birth, but they were also around during his life. You don't have to read very far into the life of Jesus to discover the times when the angels were there. In fact, at his birth, when he was an infant, an angel came and warned his parents to flee to Egypt because all the baby boys were going to be killed. And so the angel warned them. They fled to Egypt and stayed over there a year. And then an angel showed up again and said, it's safe to come back. You can come back home now. Or do you remember what happened when Jesus started his ministry? He was baptized by his cousin, John the Baptist, and immediately went into the wilderness where he was tempted 40 days and 40 nights. Remember that? So he goes in the wilderness. He's tempted 40 days and 40 nights. And Matthew 4:11 says, after that temptation happened, then the devil left Jesus, and the angels came and attended to his every need. Food, water, anything else he needed, the angels were there to do that for him. So during his life, angels attended. At his birth, angels attended. And at the resurrection, angels attended. In Matthew chapter 28, verse 1, and there appeared, Matthew 28. After the Sabbath at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for the angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. Now, that's a pretty amazing story. This big earthquake takes place, and notice the appearance of the angel, these next two verses. His appearance was like lightning. His clothes were white like snow. The guards were so afraid of him they shook and became like dead men. They just fell over. We talked about that verse last week. And then the verses go on to say in verse 5 and 6 that there were two angels inside the tomb attending the place where he lay, clarioning or announcing the resurrection. And no doubt they had been there the entire time with Jesus. Now here's something interesting. They were with Jesus and attending his birth. They were with Jesus and attending his life. They were with Jesus and attending at the resurrection. But did you notice one other place very conspicuously where the angels were not? At his death. Isn't that interesting? There were no angels at his death. Now, it's not like the angels couldn't have been there. In fact, Matthew 26, verse 53, Jesus is speaking. He said, do you not think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 10 legions of angels? So it's not like angels couldn't have been there, but they weren't there. Jesus could have called those legions. And when I read that, I'm in awe about it. It impacts me, that statement does. A legion is usually described as 6,000 angels. So throughout this entire ordeal of Jesus, through his trial, through the beatings, through the crucifixion, he could have simply asked the Father or just called out, and immediately some 72,000 angels would have been there. Try to imagine yourself as an angel while all this is going on. And you're standing there at the precipice of heaven, sword or whatever angels have, drawn, ready to go, and they are beating the Son of God, who you were with in the beginning, who created the world and created you. They are beating him. They are spitting on him. They are cursing him. They are making fun of his naked body. They are savaging his body. They are nailing him to a cross. They are putting him on the cross. The whole time I'm thinking, I want to go. I want to go if I'm the angel. Right? Well, I want to get there. I want to do something. I want to stop this. Can you imagine what it might have been like for these angels? But they didn't. Jesus never called them. So the angels ministered to Jesus all through his life, but he did not allow them to come at his death. And I'm so glad he didn't. Because had they come and taken him off the cross, everything he accomplished on the cross that's valid in my life and in your life, we would never have experienced. We'd never known freedom from the shame, freedom from the guilt, and freedom from condemnation. Those things would have never happened for us. So, what about angels and believers? What do angels do in our lives? Your life and my life. How do they minister to Christians? There are so many ways. We're going to try to talk about one or two of them this morning. Are you familiar? Some of you military guys and gals would know, but are you familiar with the name Eddie Rickenbacker? Who was shot down in World War II. Famous, very, very famous pilot. In fact, he was shot down in the Pacific, and there was thousands of people praying for him. mayor of New York, LaGuardia at the time, was called for special prayer, and it was really a big deal. Well, long story short is he was saved, and they recovered him, and he came back. And when he did, they asked him about his story, to tell his story. And he said, so he tells his story, and what happened was, when the plane was shot down, he and his crew were in a lifeboat, floating in a raft for days and days and days. And they had no food. And they were literally starving to death. He said, well, all of a sudden, in the midst of this starving to death, out of nowhere, a gull appeared on Rickenbacker's head. A big gull. And he reached up very gently and took the gull, and that became food for those pilots, for that crew. He said we devoured every piece of it, even the little bones, and it sustained us for a few more days until they were rescued. And when he tells his story, later he became a Christian. He wasn't a Christian at the time, and later he became a follower of Christ, primarily because of that. And when he would tell his story around the country, he would always say it was very obvious to us that an angel came and just placed that gull there. There was nothing. They were way out in the Pacific. There were no birds. There was nothing. And they believed firmly that an angel came and placed the gull there and gave them sustenance. Whether you believe it or not, some kind of miracle happened, and they credit God and his angels. So angels have a ministry to us. And I think it's important to understand why they minister to us. So number one, there on your note sheet, write down the word love. Angels do what they do in our lives because they love us. I know that's maybe hard to get hold of, but think about this. Daniel chapter 10, verse 10 says, "A hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. He said, 'Daniel, you are greatly beloved.'" There's that word, beloved. "Consider carefully the words I am about to speak to you, and stand up, for I have now been sent to you." And when he said this to me, I stood up trembling. He was actually saying to him in the Hebrew language, "Daniel, you are loved. I'm loving you. God's loving you.